There, backstage at TechCrunch's Disrupt, I'm Colleen Taylor.
I'm Jordan Crook.
Mike Butcher.
And we are going to discuss what just happened out there. It was the first round of startup Battlefield for Disrupt. It sort of started with a bang. 5 really great companies. We're taking a break right now as there's a coffee break. Judges are going to get their thoughts together.
Yeah.
And then 5 more companies to come. What did you guys think? Let's just get started with the first one.
Yeah, no,
Lit Motors.
Lit Motors, they were great. They've created like a half motorcycle, half car. So it's a motorcycle, speed and efficiency of an electric motorcycle actually, but it has the same safety features as a car and the same, I guess, amenities as a car.
Amazing. It uses gyroscopes to keep it upright. I just saw a video backstage of these gyroscopes tilting to keep the motorcycle upright if it gets slightly shunted from one side or the other.
Shunted.
And it's incredible, really. It's going to be, what was it, $12,000, I think?
$12,000. I think they'll start at 18 and then a year after production they go to 12.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It gets like 200 miles on one charge.
0 to 60 in 6 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, that's a high performing vehicle right there.
It is.
But with all the advantages of a motorcycle.
Yeah, and no traffic, exactly.
Right.
And you're like sexy and you know it.
You're sexy and you know it.
Yeah.
There were a lot of tweets about Lit Motors and everyone else. Here's the Crunchbase page for Lit Motors. So they've been working on this for a couple of years. I mean, this kind of stuff, obviously they had a real prototype up there on stage. They had a real vehicle.
I think a lot of people will be attracted by this because it has the safety, close to the safety of a small car almost, but because it's got an airbag as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it has the advantage of the speed, and you could probably cut through traffic a lot more easily. It's much more affordable than many cars, of course. Disadvantage, you can't carry much in it, of course. But,
Right.
Great for commuting, I think.
Yeah, great for cities. If anybody has anything to say, I have my computer open right here and I'm reading all of the Disrupt tweets, and the hashtag there is TC Disrupt, and they're just coming in fast and furious because people are very excited about everything that they've seen here.
Clearly.
So Lit Motors started out with a bang.
Yeah.
That was great. They couldn't get it off the stage though.
I had trouble. I thought actually we heard a really loud noise and it was the landing gear that comes down like a kickstand sort of. It sounded like they ripped through our projection screen and I was a little bit worried about that, but they didn't.
They didn't.
Right.
No problems.
Well, you got to have a little bit of a glitch to keep things spicy, right?
It's also very interestingly indicative of how much hardware now is coming into these startups, how the costs are coming down now towards startups being able to launch a Disrupt with a car. Would you ever see a car launch a Disrupt?
And they had only launched 750,000 so far, so they've got a long way to go in terms of production and stuff like that. It always takes a lot to manufacture hardware, but I think that the fact that they had an alpha prototype up there and they were ready to go for launch is very impressive.
I think we should branch out to Disrupt Motors.
Yeah,
that would
next
be
year.
good.
Matt
We
would
should
love that.
trademark, get that URL right now.
Motorcycles.
But just to be a little critical here, there was one person, Edgar Rivera, on Twitter said, the new Segway, super cool but too expensive to ever reach mass adoption. What do you think?
Well, that just depends because you'll pay what? How much does a motorcycle go for?
Reasonable amount.
12,000,
Yeah,
8 to 12,000 at least. And if you want a really nice one, it
15.
gets up into $15,000 or $20,000. This is saying like, if you're a mom, or I mean not a mom because you have kids obviously, but if you're a Mike Butcher and you've got to get yourself around town, you know.
If you and I think that if you want this I think would go very well in Europe where there's a lot of bad weather. So you could commute to work. You don't get wet like you would on a motorcycle or a bicycle or something. And it's fast and it parks easily. And I think in Europe this would go down a treat.
Yeah. And the judges seem to like it too. I mean, they had some good questions. Kevin Rose mentioned that he has owned a motorcycle before, so he was asking some very pointed questions about it, and he seemed satisfied.
I actually think that he wanted to ride it around backstage. We should try to get some footage of that.
We should be getting footage of that. So what was next? What was after Lit Motors?
It was Famous, and they're actually, it's semi-complex, but once you understand it, it's relatively simple. So what Famous does is they take, they're basically a gaming engine. So they have the power of a gaming engine to render in 3D, but what they can do is they can put it on any device. they can put it in a browser. So you're not used to an interactive 3D web app to be able to perform really well in a browser. And it's not HTML5, it's not WebGL, it's not native, it's them. It's their gaming engine, it's a brand new type of technology. And they're communicating directly with the system's GPU. So everything performs really easily. They're gonna try to, I mean, developing for 3D is obviously takes a whole lot of math that people aren't necessarily capable of, but what they've been able to do is make it writable in JavaScript. So anyone who can develop for JavaScript can now create a completely 3D web app, iOS app, Android app, gaming console app, and it's simple tools that they've created. So
I am so glad that you just explained it, because I feel like there were a couple of us back here watching the presentation, and it's hard to parse exactly what.
I think the judges had trouble too, which is why they came down on them pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because it does take a minute to wrap your head around it, and you really have to know every piece of it to understand why it's so disruptive. But I think at the end of the day, it's really great because they're even thinking about, okay, well, 3D is difficult for people to almost comprehend, especially as a developer. So we'll give them the same performance in a 2D app, and literally all they have to do is flip a switch. Apps in 3D. So they're kind of leading people, the way that the founder explained it to me is we're giving people the breadcrumbs to kind of coax them into a 3D world. And it makes sense in terms of the fact that we live our lives, half of our lives on a computer, and everything's 2D, and then you look up and everything around you is 3D.
Right.
So it's only a matter of time. I think they have what it takes to definitely make a difference. They want to make it all open source, so they're asking developers to create templates the same way you would on WordPress. All open source, you cannot hide or keep your template to yourself.
Yep.
And eventually, I mean, our Facebook, even something as simple as the file manager on your computer in 3D.
And I think one of the examples they gave was that maybe you could develop a Pinterest-style web startup based on their engine, which had sort of, pictures moving forwards and backwards, and you could therefore navigate a new kind of a web app using this interface. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a game. It could be something
not
just,
at all.
To look at content, but in a 3D manner, which was interesting.
I actually think that's their main goal, is to get people who already have apps, so big deals like Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all those people, if they can say, just check it out, see if you want to build a template for Instagram or Pinterest and see how you like it, and then they can do that, license that, and get some money back in terms of a business model, but they can also kind of change the way that we use these scrolling, flat interfaces.
Yeah, Victor Rico just tweeted he really enjoyed demoing the Famous experience on his iPad. So it's cool that immediately, people, these companies are launching, and then people are either at home or out in the crowd, and they're going straight to the site and trying it out and banging up against it.
Who was next?
Yeah, what
It was Social Fortress. They're actually a company that we brought back from, we went to a meetup out in the southeast, and we traveled to 5 or 6 cities, and we met Social Fortress in Atlanta.
Okay.
And we were pretty excited about them, so we asked them to come to Disrupt, and I have pretty high hopes for Social Fortress. I think they have what it takes.
Don't you think, though, that they're trying to do too many things at once, both be an enterprise app and a consumer app at the same time?
Well, who was it on stage today? One of those tech celebs, I can't remember which one, said that it was Reid Hoffman. The most interesting apps, the most interesting enterprise apps are the ones that find some common ground between enterprise and consumer. So I think that's you make your money in the enterprise and you make your popularity in the consumer. And if you can find a way to do both successfully, then I think you've got a recipe for
Do you think
success.
you would trust Social Fortress with your Gmail and your bank accounts and everything else?
Well, I'd trust them over Google.
Interesting, controversial.
Interesting, very, very controversial. Some people, this was another company that was a little bit looking at the tweets. Daniel Kotze Nikov, I'm sorry I said that. Danielka is his at. Social Fortress messes up everything you post online to be viewed only by your friends who have it. But then Lance Hahn said Startup Battlefield is great, love the judges' pushback on Social Fortress. So the judges did push back a little bit.
Yeah.
People liked seeing that. I mean, it's an ambitious thing.
Well, that's
Very
their
ambitious.
biggest issue, is that in order for Social Fortress to work, is I can't actually, if I hook it up to my browser, then anything that I post on Yammer, you can't see anymore until you get it. You can't see it anymore until you get it. So it takes
Absolutely.
some influential people with a lot of friends and a lot of followers to get that thing hooked up.
We'll have to get Scoble onto it then.
MG.
Or something. Yeah, I think it's if the technology is as good as they say it is, then they've got a good future.
Absolutely.
Right, right.
But if it's not, we'll see.
We will see. I didn't see anybody who had already demoed it or anything like that. So one person asked, did the founder, this is Rayan Haramanchi, asked, did the founder of Social Fortress just post his mother's credit card and social security info on a giant screen? I think I missed that blip. I would hope that was dummy data, that wasn't actually.
Well, I doubt that his
Probably
mom's email address is Mother Goretti or whatever.
Right,
But,
whatever it was, yeah.
But yeah, either way, I think that's the test in general. I mean, can I send you an email and say, oh, Colleen, I need you to help me out. My credit card information is this, this, and this. And I know without a doubt that not even Google sees it.
Yeah.
You're the only one that sees it. And I think that's the point.
A real lockbox. What was next? What was after Social
Was
Fortress?
it Bright Context?
Yes, Bright Concepts.
Why don't you
Bright
tell us about
Concepts.
that?
They were unusual. So they started off explaining effectively that they built an app called Election Meter, where you could track, Republican versus Democrats polling. But it's kind of two-screen media. So while you're watching TV, you'd be sort of voting up or down either way and giving opinions. But they built it on the back end of this platform, effectively called Bright Context, which is a real-time platform. It reminded me of this whole debate that we're having really about Twitter and app.net at the moment, and they seem to have addressed some of these issues by both bundling up real-time platform with an API for developers plus analytics, and really trying to tick all the boxes that a lot of developers want from real-time platforms, so that you could then build something like an election opinion application and that kind of a thing.
Right.
But yeah, it sounded almost a little bit too good to be true. That it was suddenly here to solve all the problems that developers have that they've been sort of complaining about with the likes of Twitter, etc. recently. But it's there to be tested and see if they can actually come through on some of their claims.
Right, right. How did the judges sort of react to that one?
With a certain amount of skepticism, I think.
Yeah.
It did seem to sort of promise the world to some extent.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's the bang on trend. Everybody's still talking about real time. Years later,
Right.
after real time really sort of became a big issue.
There are a lot of trends happening
Yeah.
in their whole, because they're talking about the election, which of course is coming up here in the States, that, so there are a lot of kind of buzzy things, seems right place, right time, which can kind of make people a bit skeptical.
It's to be seen whether or not their platform can actually perform, and it'd be really interesting to see them, open up and see developers kick the tires on what it's capable of.
Right, right. So next, what was the next one?
The final one was Tovbot. Am I saying that right?
Tovbot.
Tovbot?
Yes,
Tovbot.
Tovbot.
That's how it's spelled, so
There you
that's how
go.
I'm saying it.
Yeah.
And here's the crunch base of them. They were formed in 2012, a group of robot researchers and entrepreneurs. This was a cool demo. I mean, any kind of thing with a physical.
That's the
Yeah,
thing,
it had
though.
a very
I mean,
nice
like, it's
dancing robot.
The
a dancing robot. Like that's. I mean, like I hate to be like the a bubble burster, but like it is. Essentially, it's a dancing robot.
With speakers.
With speakers, and you talk into your phone. That's nice. It computes things into the cloud based on so you can say play something happy. You don't have to say play this song by Adele or whatever. You can actually say I'm in the mood for something sad or melancholy, and it'll figure that out. But so can Pandora.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
in terms of revolutionary, I mean, we've seen dancing robots. We've seen robots that can play music, and we've seen services that can kind of tell your mood and give you songs back, like songs Pandora. So it's really a combination of those things. It's nice. I'm not. I'm not that excited.
I think one of the potentially that they were hitting the right, touching the right touch points were pricing, because they were going to be at about $199 or $149 if you hit their Kickstarter campaign right now. So it's relatively affordable for the kind of technology we're talking about. This isn't a kind of a walking, jumping gymnastics robot. This is just a simple robot that sits on the side and might entertain the kids a little bit.
Yeah.
But and I think I'm sure a lot of kids would be entertained by it, but it might end up being a bit of a novelty.
Yeah.
It was interesting that they were talking about really their platform was pulling from the cloud data about songs, about whether or not they were sad or happy. So they were actually pulling a lot of real-time information from the cloud about music, and also it could also follow you around the room as well. So perhaps the application and the technology could be applied in different kinds of ways.
Yes.
Exactly.
And we're just seeing it in this form right now, this TOV bot that they've come up with. It was cute.
Right, right. Yeah, it was
but,
cute. I always worry I'm like, this hippie person, but I worry, it's just a single purpose gadget. And
Yeah.
how many of these are going to be in a landfill in a couple of years? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas that core technology, that's great, that can be repurposed and reused, but these single purpose cute little toy that, it's just another thing.
And it comes back to what Jack Dorsey was saying this morning. I mean, founding moments happen again and again and again. So that's not to say exactly what you said. I mean, the technology itself can actually probably do some pretty incredible things. Right now, it is a standalone kind of music player, a really ritzed up music player, but eventually it could be giving you recipes in the kitchen.
Yep.
It could be, you know what I'm saying, and it could go on, and the possibilities
making the food.
and then it could start
You wouldn't even
dicing.
need a spouse anymore. You wouldn't even need,
Who needs a
like
spouse
you don't
when
need
you
to
have a robot?
talk to anybody.
No, I can make
you know,
make your meals for you. Maybe.
make your meals.
Dance
It
while
looks
it does
like we're
it.
about to go back in.